Hey everybody, we have today for our feature spotlight, we're going to be talking about mandatory fields in Business Central.
Should be fun.
Yep.
There's a few of them.
Yep, so I'm still enjoying, and I'm not getting paid, by the way, for this, but Krumbacher Pilsner is delicious today. So,
That it is.
So for mandatory fields, there is a standard feature in Business Central called mandatory fields. And how this works is if you ever go in and let's say you create a new vendor record, let's say for example, you may notice that there are certain fields. As soon as you hit the new button, it opens the vendor card. Mm-hmm. And the name field is a good example. It will display a red asterisk immediately to the left of the field where you enter the name.
Yeah.
And then what happens is, as soon as you enter the vendor name and leave the field, that red asterisk disappears. So what that does is that's a visual indicator to you that that field was a mandatory field and that it needs to be filled in. And as you scroll down, you may go to other tabs, and tax area code is another one. Posting groups would be like another example, like vendor posting group or general business posting group. Those have red asterisks on it if you leave those values blank.
But mandatory isn't really mandatory, right?
Yeah, so that's what we're here to talk about, right? So what does the word mandatory mean? Well, in Business Central speak, it means that this is a field that generally you're going to need to fill in, or you may get an error message if you try to create or post transactions for this record, right?
Yeah. So according to Microsoft, it means that you will not be able to complete a process without these fields being populated. So, but what is the process? Like you were saying on a new customer card or name or whatever it is, if the name is required and you don't fill it in and you exit out of it,
what happens?
It's going to notify you, I think, right? But what is completing the process? Did it not create the customer card? Would that be not completing the process? Right. But I think it does, doesn't it?
The takeaway here is that these fields that are marked as mandatory fields with the red asterisk are not actually mandatory for you to continue.
Not all of them.
It's right. It's a strong suggestion, if you will, or a recommendation. Yeah. But indeed, you can leave the record and process and continue on without filling it in. You and I, we just did a test here. If you have an item record with no description on it, you will see that there's a red asterisk on the description on the item card. However, I was able to create a sales order and ship and invoice that sales order with that item that had a no value set in the description.
So you're able to complete the process.
Yes.
Which is an issue, I guess, right? A little bit of an issue.
Yeah, I think it can be misleading to people, when they see, if the system says this is a mandatory field. I think the first expectation that people get is that they're going to get an error message.
Yes, 100%.
If they try to save this record and leave the record without filling in that field.
Yeah. I always think, and this is just me, where if I was just creating whatever record it was, if I didn't enter the mandatory field, I'd get the error message. But then if I left that page, my assumption is it would not save it because I did not finish whatever it was I was supposed to finish.
Yep.
But Business Central's assumption is different.
Yeah, it works differently. You'll notice when you're on any page, let's say you're adding a new item record, you will see up in the top right corner, there's a little indicator. And usually there's a little check mark and it says saved.
Gotcha.
Right? But as you go through a vendor or an item record and you're making changes to it, you'll actually notice if you change a field and advance out of the field, you'll see that little save checkbox kind of switch momentarily, and it's saving as you go.
Saving. Yeah.
So what happens is there's kind of two levels of data being saved. One is it's as you go, as you're creating, right? You create a new item, you're filling it in. It's saving as you go. So if something were to happen, you close the page, it saved it.
Yeah.
There's no save button.
Right.
It's automatically saving it. But there is the ability to embed logic at the page closing. In addition to that, to say, hey, when I close the page, check these fields or do this logic or whatever it is, right? So there is an opportunity to build extensions or extend the Business Central functionality to actually do a true code mandatory field, right? That says but if I close this item page and I didn't fill in the description, don't let me leave that page until I filled it in.
That was my question. Right. So could you build something that doesn't let the page close until you fill it in?
Correct. Okay. Yep. And you can
makes
do
a lot of
that,
sense.
And depending on what your requirements are and how you want to do it, sometimes you may give the user a warning. You have not filled in the description. Would you still like to close? Mm-hmm. And you could say yes or no, and then it keeps you on the page so you can go fill it in, and then that error goes away.
So what do you think the reasoning is behind I understand why there's a red asterisk letting you know this field's mandatory, but what's the reasoning behind letting you leave the page and whatnot, when it's Business Central out of the box?
Yeah.
I can't think of anything.
My only guess is that, Business Central is a fairly substantial application in terms of the tables and the fields and functionality, right, in there. And the way that it's kind of architected to truly enforce that, right, it's a lot of effort to say, right, we want to enforce this. And here's really why. Because if they were to develop a feature for mandatory fields, it wouldn't be good enough simply for Microsoft to determine the specific fields that they want to make mandatory. You would have to provide a front-end tool, application, for the system administrator, for each company, to go in and specify exactly which fields on which tables they want to be mandatory for their company.
Gotcha. So they got to build a little bit more
into
it.
And I think it's a significant exercise. There is a Business Central idea out there right now that needs more votes for Microsoft to act on it.
Yeah.
I am actually going to post a separate one, or I may just
add to
this existing one, because what I would envision is something similar to the changelog. If you're familiar with the Business Central or the changelog function, changelog allows you to track, right, to write a changelog entry, and you can pick which tables and which fields you want to track. I see that same functionality applying to mandatory fields.
Makes sense.
Right? If I can track at a field level, which fields do I want to track when they were inserted, modified, or deleted? Why can't I also just check a box that says, oh, this is a mandatory field?
Yep.
Right.
I think you should be able to.
And so, in our app segment today, we are going to tie that into this discussion, and we're going to take a look at one mandatory field apps, plus a couple other ones.
Yep.
So there are apps out there. We're going to talk about that in the next segment. But I really think this is because of the global nature of it, that the fact that you would want this to be universally available for companies to pick and choose which tables and which fields they want. I see this as being a new feature down the road at some point that Microsoft embeds with the standard product.
It's too much of a necessity for it not to be included with Business Central out of the box.
Yep.
I completely agree with you.
Yep.
And they'll add it to the base code hopefully and make it kind of simple, and maybe that's where the issue's hard if you had custom fields. I don't know, but
Yeah, so let's I wanted to just wrap up this segment to say, so to answer the question people probably have as well. Out of the box, when I open Business Central and I look at the item card, I see that there are maybe let's say 5 or 6 fields that have this red asterisk. What if you want a different field to also have a red asterisk on it? Or you've added custom fields and you want the red asterisk to appear on that.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do it? The answer is through an extension.
Yep.
So there is no front-end user feature where you go in and you can quote, mark something
Right.
as field mandatory. Instead, there is a property under the hood within code that a developer can go in and set this property show mandatory equal to yes, and that code or that through that extension is what then will put that red
Gotcha.
box on there. Now, there is also, while you're in there, right, if you're doing this extension to say, hey, let's make this code mandatory, there is a second separate property called not blank that you also, instead of saying the show mandatory that'll put the red asterisk, or in addition to that,
Mm-hmm.
you could set the not blank property equal to yes, and that will stop or block the user from saving or leaving that record if
So
that
that's-
field has not been populated.
Right. So, I mean, that sounds like something that most people would want. So it's pretty. It's
Exactly.
pretty
Yeah. So if you're running Business Central today and you say, I really have to have some mandatory fields that get filled in before the user can continue,
Mhm.
then what
You need
you would
some
have to do is
custom
just build an extension that sets these field properties on them to not blank equals yes. And you should be able to continue.
Or you could download an extension, right?
Yes, which we're going to talk about next. So stay tuned.